Welcome to The Debate. Today, we're diving deep into a feeling that, well, I think almost everyone recognizes, this sense of being exhausted, of being out of control, thanks to the overwhelming nature of our modern digital lives.
It's completely undeniable. I mean, the whole technological environment we live in is just designed to be extractive. You have experts, people like Tristan Harris, describing the smartphone as, what, a slot machine in your pocket? It's literally engineered to exploit our psychological weak spots with these intermittent variable rewards.
Exactly. So we're starting from the same place. We both agree on the diagnosis. The system is rigged. And the result is, this measurable rise in anxiety, this thing researchers are calling solitude deprivation. It's a systemic problem.
Right. So the question isn't whether we're in a trap. We are. The real debate is, how do we get out?
Precisely. And that brings us to the philosophy of digital minimalism. The idea is, to be intensely intentional, to focus your online time only on a handful of activities that really truly support your values and to just let go of the rest. So the central question for us is, does this kind of radical intentionality actually provide genuine liberation? Or is it, maybe, an insufficient individualistic fix with some pretty serious unintended social costs?
And I'm going to argue that while that intentionality is a good first step, the individual solution is ultimately problematic. It feels a bit like building a beautiful, expensive fence around your own yard, while the engine of compulsion just keeps running unchecked for everyone else.
And I'll be arguing that this radical, intentional boundary setting is really the only effective defense we have as individuals. Technology is a tool, and reclaiming the ability to direct our own attention is the ultimate act of liberation against forces that are, designed to exploit it. My core argument really rests on this vital need to reclaim what you could call our life minutes. I mean, if you follow the thinking of someone like Thoreau, you realize we're constantly trading bits of our life for everything. The key insight of digital minimalism is that the cumulative cost of all that digital clutter, all that low-value consumption, it just far outweighs the small benefits. The goal isn't just less screen time, it's maximizing high-quality value while, happily missing out on the rest.
Mm-hmm.
And we have evidence that this really works. In these digital declutter experiments, people stopped mindlessly scrolling and instead finished 5, 6, even 8 books in a couple of months. Or they restarted these really engaging, high-skilled hobbies like painting or coding. It leads to a life that just feels less rushed, less distracted. It's essentially what some call Amish hacking. You test the technology and you only allow it in if its benefits can be maximized while the negatives are strictly contained. That's liberation.
Sure. I absolutely appreciate the focus on intentionality. And the data on personal improvement is compelling, but I come at this on a slightly different angle. We agree the attention economy is a race to the bottom of the brainstem, right? But the proposed fix, individual withdrawal, it just feels like it fails to account for the sheer scale of the problem. If these companies have invested billions of dollars in behavioral science to make compulsive use, basically inevitable, how can we expect individuals to just opt out without some kind of consequence?
Sure.
The solution as it's framed, it risks turning into this privileged form of self-optimization. The focus often seems to be on protecting the business 8 hours, meaning the individual gets more focused primarily to serve their professional output. And that kind of freedom, it risks turning minimalists into hyper-performing, hyper-efficient, but maybe isolated individuals. And beyond that, I really challenge the idea that you can just opt out without paying a social or civic price in our frankly very polarized public sphere. So let's start right there with that efficiency critique. If the entire industry model relies on extracting every last bit of our attention for revenue, and Tristan Harris himself admitted that trying to minimize distraction at Google failed because it would reduce revenue, then what actually happens when an individual reclaims those, say, 3 or 4 hours a day from their phone?
Okay.
I worry that we're shifting that recovered attention straight into professional efficiency. I'm thinking of the writer Arnold Bennett, who argued that putting your full energy into your non-work hours will increase the value of the business 8. I mean, isn't this what some critics call productivity porn? Isn't digital minimalism just applying that same principle to our leisure time, telling us to seek high-quality rest not for its own sake, but because it makes us more focused, more efficient cogs from the machine?
I'm sorry, I don't buy that connection. Let me tell you why. That line of thinking, it reduces all human activity down to like pure capital output. It completely ignores the profound difference between mindless consumption and what we should be defining as high-quality leisure. The entire purpose of reclaiming that time is specifically not to be more productive in a capitalist sense. It's to find pursuits that provide a source of inward joy, what Aristotle called skole, leisure for its own sake.
Mm-hmm.
And high-quality leisure, by its very nature, involves active effort. It requires skill. Think about the examples: learning to weld, woodworking, restoring a car. These analog crafts give you unambiguous proof of your skill and mastery. That is the polar opposite of the shallow, passive consumption that digital platforms offer. The effort required for active leisure, it actually energizes you. It's restorative. It's not like the fatigue you get from hours of just idle screen tapping. The outcome is well-being, not just a better performance review.
That's a compelling defense of the quality of the activity, I'll grant you that. But let's shift to the external consequences of this kind of retreat. If we accept Jaron Lanier's point that online platforms push discussions toward emotionally charged and draining extremes because, well, outrage gets more eyeballs, and if the most thoughtful, intentional people, the digital minimalists, drastically limit their engagement, what is the collective result of that intellectual withdrawal?
I see where you're going.
Are we not, in effect, forfeiting the public square, leaving this necessary civic dialogue to be amplified by trolls and bots and the most polarized actors? I mean, this isn't just about personal well-being anymore. It's about the health of our shared democracy.
Say, I would frame that entire question differently. I have to push back on the idea that digital connection is the same thing as a real civic dialogue. Our brains are adapted for high bandwidth interaction. We process nuanced analog cues, tone of voice, facial expressions. The one-click like button, on the other hand, is the ultimate insult to our social processing machinery. It's one bit of information. It completely lacks the richness needed for any kind of productive, critical engagement. True social flourishing, true civic engagement, it doesn't happen in the toxic, low-bandwidth social feed. It happens through conversation-centric communication.
But we live in the world as it is, not as we'd wish it to be. You can't just wish away the fact that political and social movements now mobilize online. Your solution seems to suggest that thoughtful people should just abandon the field entirely, ceding influence to those who are willing to play in those emotional extremes. We absolutely need policy reform, but we also need engagement from citizens who understand nuance. The social cost of that intellectual retreat is very real, no matter how low quality the platform is.
No, but retreating from the low-quality noise is precisely what frees up the bandwidth for high-quality, real-world connection and effective civic action. We're not talking about isolation. We're talking about substituting superficial clicks with deeply engaged alternatives. That means, setting up conversation office hours or organizing local volunteer groups or engaging in structured political action where you have to talk to people face-to-face. Real impact isn't measured in follower counts. It's measured by tangible change. And to bring it back to this idea of internal intentionality, we have to re-emphasize the importance of solitude. It's just so often lost in our always-on culture, and it is crucial for mental sovereignty. I mean, look throughout history. Think about Abraham Lincoln. During the Civil War, he would escape the White House and go to his quiet cottage. That time for quiet, intentional reflection, walking alone, was absolutely critical for him to process the horrors of the war and wrestle with the Emancipation Proclamation.
Right.
The goal isn't isolation. It's about finding a rhythm of reflection alternating between deep solitude, where the mind can think, and intense connection. Solitude is the ingredient that lets you distinguish your own values from the values being relentlessly pushed on you by the digital world. Without it, your mind never really belongs to you.
That is a powerful example, but doesn't achieving that mental sovereignty on a larger scale require a collective critique of the underlying power structures, not just managing individual symptoms?
The urgency we all feel to be constantly available, yes, it's exaggerated, but it exists for a reason. The entire digital attention economy relies on it.
Okay, but
The individual solution, even a very intentional one, kind of avoids the deeper need to transform the digital ecosystem itself. It's like accepting the system is rigged and then just building a better firewall around yourself instead of demanding a systemic change. We're treating our personal burnout while the mechanism of compulsion just keeps churning out societal dysfunction. We need to be talking about things like data ownership regulations, platform liability, public media that isn't based on an attention extraction model. Just focusing on the individual lets the platforms completely off the hook.
that's a fair point about the systemic gap. But I would counter that policy transformation can't happen until individuals recognize the scale of the theft that's happening to their own attention. The power of digital minimalism is that it's an accessible, immediate intervention. It's a proof of concept for the individual that they can resist the default. Policy follows culture, and culture starts with individuals recognizing what's truly valuable. Without that personal baseline, any policy is just going to be bypassed by the platforms.
But that cultural shift has to be communal. If we just encourage widespread retreat, we risk creating a two-tiered society. You have the intentional, high-performing elite who can afford the time to curate their digital lives, and then everyone else, left exposed to the full force of the attention economy, with fewer thoughtful voices left to guide the public discussion.
It's a risk, but it has to be balanced against the benefit of proving there is a scalable alternative to the path of exhaustion. So I think we've reached the core of the tension here. On one hand, you have the undeniable power of individual intentionality. It works to reclaim autonomy. But on the other, you have these real ethical and social compromises that come with retreating from the collective digital space.
Exactly. The end goal has to be what you called mental sovereignty, the right to direct your own attention toward your own values. But we have to admit that getting there is incredibly complex, and focusing only on personal optimization, well, it's a necessary first step for an individual, but it risks failing to address the fundamental business models that make the whole system so extractive for society.
In understanding these competing pressures, the individual need for boundaries versus the demand for civic presence is just essential for navigating our current world. It really underscores that living a good life today demands both a personal rigor in setting our own values and a critical, nuanced engagement with the external technological world.
At the end of the day, whether you choose a radical personal detox or a more engaged, policy-focused approach, the key insight is the same. The system is fighting for your time, and it's only through intentional grounding and maybe a lot more communal effort that we can hope to match the immense resources that are arrayed against our attention. There's clearly much more to explore here.